Hey guys, in the last two episodes, we covered how your heating system will fail during winter emergencies. And I showed you the number one solution portable propane heaters. But here's what no one talks about: if you don't store propane correctly, you're creating a bigger danger than the one you're trying to prevent. Propane is incredibly useful and it's incredibly unforgiving if you handle it wrong. Today, I'm going to show you the exact way to store propane safely on your property and how much you actually need, and the mistakes that could cost you everything. Of course, guys, I'm Phil Davis with Ancestry Lands, and let's talk about propane storage. What is propane? Propane is a liquefied petroleum gas stored under pressure. At room temperature, it wants to expand to 270 times its liquid volume. The pressure is what makes it so efficient as fuel. It's also what makes it most dangerous when it mishandled. Improper storage leads to leaks, fires, explosion, and it's not hypothetical. It happened in 2019. A propane explosion in Maine killed one firefighter and injured several others. The cause: improper storage and handling. In 2020, a house in Pennsylvania was leveled by a propane explosion. The tank was stored too close to the home without proper ventilation. These weren't just freak accidents, they were preventable tragedies caused by ignoring the basic safety rules. But here's the good news: propane is safe when you follow the rules. We're going to show you how. And millions of Americans use it every day without incident. So, the key is knowledge, not worry. And that's what this episode's about. If you're going to store it for emergency heating, you need to do it right because the stakes are just too high to guess. So, let's start with the basics. There are two main types of propane containers that you'll be working with. First, the 1 pound dispensable canisters. These are those small green cylinders you see at camping stores. They're convenient, portable, and perfect for short term emergency use. A single 1 pound canister will run a Mr. Heater Buddy, which is included down in the links below, for 3 to 6 hours, depending on the heat setting. For a 3 day emergency, you might need 12 to 18 of these canisters. For a week, you're looking at 30 or more. Second, the 20 pound refillable tanks. These are your standard propane cylinders that you use for your grill. The 20 pound tanks hold about 4.7 gallons of propane with an adapter hose. This will run a portable propane heater for over 100 hours on a low setting. That's more than 4 full days of continuous heat from a single tank. For most homeowners, a common approach makes sense. Keep the 1 pound canister for quick access and portability, and have the 20 pound tanks for extended use. Now, let's talk about how to store them safely. Rule number one: the propane must be stored outdoors. Never store them inside your home, garage, basement, or shed. Why? Because propane is heavier than air. If there's a leak, the gas sinks to the lowest point and accumulates. In an enclosed space like a basement or garage, this creates an explosion hazard. One tiny spark, and a pilot light, static electricity, it can ignite it. And where should you store the propane heater now? Outdoors in a well ventilated area. Here are the specific requirements. First, store the tanks on a flat, stable surface. Concrete or gravel works well. Avoid dirt or grass where the tank can sink or tip over. Second, keep the tanks at least 10 feet away from your home. Remember, we talked about that explosion. In other buildings or any ignition sources such as grill, fire pits, electric panels, or air conditioning units. Third, the tanks need to always be upright. Never store them on their side. That valve is designed to release vapor, not liquid. If the tank is sideways, the liquid can escape, creating a serious hazard. Four, protect the tanks from direct sunlight and extreme heat. Propane expands when heated. Too much heat can increase that pressure, and boom goes the tank. If you live in a hot climate, place the tanks in a shaded area or use a propane tank cover designed for UV protection. Fifth, store the tanks to prevent tipping. Use a propane tank stand or anchor them with straps. Wind, animals, and accidents happen all the time, but your tank should not move. Six, keep the area clear. No debris, no flammable materials, no clutter. If there's ever a leak, you want maximum ventilation and no fuel for a fire. Now, let's do the math on how much propane you need for an emergency scenarios. For a 3 day emergency, a Mr. Heater portable buddy on a low setting for 8 hours a day, you'll burn about zero point 0.2 pounds of propane per hour. That's 1.6 pounds per day, or about 5 pounds total for 3 days. A 20 pound tank holds 4.7 gallons, which is about 20 pounds of propane. So one tank easily covers a 3 day emergency with heat to spare. For a 7-day emergency, you'll need about 11 pounds of propane, and it's still within a single 20-pound tank. So for a 2-week emergency, you need about 22 pounds of propane. That's two 20-pound tanks, or about 22 of the 1-pound canisters. A little bit of math. For a full month, you're looking at about 48 pounds, or roughly three 20-pound tanks. Or you can do two 20-pound tanks and, a few more singles. Here's my recommendation for rural landowners. Keep at least two 20-pound tanks on hand at all times. It gives you about 2 weeks of emergency heating with some buffer. If you're in an area prone to extended outages, consider 4 tanks. That's about a month worth of backup. Keep a dozen 1-pound canisters for portability and flexibility in case you need it. This might sound like overkill, but remember, during Texas in 2021, that freeze, there were areas without power for over 2 weeks. You'd rather be safe than sorry, all right? And history always favors the prepared. Always transport the tanks in an upright position and secure them so they won't tip or roll over in your vehicle. Second, you keep your vehicles well ventilated. Crack those windows. Propane is heavier than air. Remember, we talked about that. So if there's a leak inside your vehicle, it will accumulate at the lowest point, and we don't want it contained. Third, never leave propane tanks in a hot vehicle. Internal pressures increase temperature. And in a summer day inside a car, that can reach 150 degrees or more. Now that's dangerous. Fourth, go straight home and don't run errands with propane tanks in your car. Minimize the time they're in transport. When handling tanks, always check for damage, dents, rust, corrosion, or red flags. A damaged tank that should be inspected by a professional or replaced. Never use a tank that smells like gas. Propane has a distinct rotten egg smell as an added safety feature. If you smell it, there's a leak. Move the tank outside immediately, away from ignition sources, and contact your propane supplier. Never attempt to repair the tank yourself. That's a job for professionals with the right equipment and training. So when your 20-pound tank runs low, you really have two options: refill or exchange. Refilling means you take your empty tank to a propane refill station where they'll fill it at a weight all the way up to capacity. You'll need about 20 pounds of propane, and it usually costs somewhere between $15 to $20. That's pretty affordable. Exchanging, on the other hand, means swapping your empty tank for a pre-fill one like gas stations, hardware stores, or those big box retailers. It's definitely convenient, but exchanging tanks typically costs one only filled to 15 pounds, not 20. So you're actually getting about 25% less propane for roughly the same price. For emergency preparedness, the recommended refilling, you'll get more propane for your money, and you keep your own tanks, which you already know the history of. It's a good idea to mark your tanks when the refill date using a permanent marker or label. Now, for the propane itself, it really doesn't go bad, but the tanks do need to be recertified every 12 years. Recertification date is stamped right on the collar of the tank, and if your tank is past its recertification date, a refill station just won't fill it. You'll need to get it recertified or go ahead and replace it. The propane tanks, honestly, they don't require a ton of maintenance, but regular inspection is absolutely critical. Every few months, just visibly inspect your tanks for rust, dust, or any damage. Check the valve for leaks by applying soapy water around the connection. If bubbles form, you got a leak. Tighten the connection or replace the valve if you need to. Also, check the rubber gasket inside the valve connection. If it's cracked, brittle, or missing, go ahead and replace it. These are inexpensive and you can find them at almost any hardware store. Always store your tanks with the valve closed, even if they're empty. It helps prevent any moisture debris from getting inside. If you're not using your tanks for a while, it's still a good habit to check them every few months. Outdoor storage means your tanks are exposed to weather, temperature swings, and even wildlife. A quick visual check, and honestly, only takes about 2 minutes. They can really prevent a problem down the road. Before you stock up on propane, it's important to check your local regulations. Some municipalities have a limit on how much propane you can store on residential property. In a lot of areas, you're allowed to store up to 1,000 pounds of propane without any special permits. That's about 50 of those 20-pound tanks, which are way more than most homeowners will ever need. But if you live in a homeowners association or a densely populated area, there might be stricter rules, so watch out for those Karens. If you're making a quick call to your local fire marshal or zoning office, you can confirm this. If you're storing larger quantities like 100, 500-pound tanks in a whole home backup, you may need permits or professional installation. The key thing is to be informed. Follow your local regulations isn't just about compliance, it's about safety and liability. All right, let's bring it all together, guy. Propane is one of the honestly best fuels for emergency heating. It's affordable, very available, and works even when the grid fails. But you know, it demands some respect. If it's stored incorrectly, it can be dangerous. Stored correctly, though, it's reliable and safe. Here's your action plan. First, decide on how much propane you need based on your own risk profile. Second, two 20-pound tanks is a good baseline for most folks. Four, if you're in an area that's prone to extended outages. Second, set up your proper outdoor storage, flat surfaces, 10 feet away from structures, upright position, secured against tipping and protected from over extreme heat. Third, invest in upright equipment. That means propane adapter hose that connect those 20-pound tanks to your portable heater, carbon monoxide detector for indoor safety, and a tank gauge so you know when it's time to refill. Fourth, inspect your tanks regularly. Just make it part of your seasonal routine. Fifth, know where to refill locally when emergency hits. You really don't want to be scrambling. Preparedness isn't just about fear, it's about responsibility. So having a solid propane storage means you're ready for when others aren't. In the series, we've covered your heating solutions that are vulnerable, the solution that actually work, and now how to store your fuel safely. Next episode, we'll look at real stories from people who survived winter emergencies because they were prepared, and I'll show you how to build a complete winter survival kit for under $500. Everything we've covered is part of a bigger mission helping people build real security and generational wealth through land ownership and practical preparedness. If you're serious about your independence, hey, grab my book, Getting Dollars from Dirt. It's available on Amazon. It's a complete roadmap to buying, owning, and profiting from land. If you're ready to take that next step, visit AncestryLands.com for resources, opportunities, and step-by-step guidance. Hey, I'm Phil Davis. Thanks so much. Don't wait for your next storm to start preparing. Do it now while you have the time. And just a reminder, this content is way for educational purposes. It's not financial, legal, or medical advice. So, thanks for watching. Smash that like button. And remember, all the things that I've talked about are in affiliate links below. Make sure you check them out in the description section. Take care and have a great day.